we've been speaking, at least last week, of proceeding with caution. And when we do proceed with caution, of course, because Yahweh tells us to be careful, to make sure that we are following him, to be careful. And the reason why we have to be careful, obviously, is because there are many spirits out there. And we are children, we are very young. We have been actually cut off from our adulthood, from the things that we knew and were able to do with no problem. And so at one point we knew when something else was coming in that was not of the spirit of that body that we're of. And we were able to either reject it if we wanted to, or accept it, because that's what actually Adam and Eve did. You know, Eve was deceived, but Adam wasn't. He chose. And so when the seed is in you in that manner, for you and I to fall, we have to choose to do that, which is what we did. We chose to do that with Adam. Okay? At that point, that's what we did. So now we're being redeemed. And in order to be redeemed, we're being led. And so when you're being led, so you have a shepherd that's leading a sheep or leading sheep, and the sheep then follows the shepherd. The shepherd lead them into green pastures. This green pastures is life, is the life-giving essence, because that's what sheep eat. They eat the green pastures, which is the herbs or the fruit of the ground, grass, whatever. But the green is a symbol of something that has life in it. So the green pastures is leading you to the life that you had before, the ancient of time, okay, that we all fell from. And it says, he restores our souls. That means our souls return to that place which it was before. So in order to do this, we are being led, just like the Psalm said. Yahweh is our shepherd. You shall not want. He leads us in the green pasture. He restores our souls. Okay, this is actually what's taking place right now. So now we have to learn to discern when something else comes in there and wants to take the sheep off. But if you remember Yahshua said, my sheep knows my voice, and they will not listen to another. Okay? They will not listen to another. Well, in the Psalms, it tells us that the rod and the staff of Yahweh, that comforts us. Well, the rod and the staff is symbolic of the laws and the prophets, which the Spirit comes through those right there and gives to us. Now, if you remember, when the children of Israel were taken off, every time they're taken off or led to become slaves to somebody else, the one thing that was common every time is they strayed from what Yahweh told them to do. Now, they didn't want to do this. It wasn't like, well, let's go ahead and do something else than what Yahweh says. That's not what it is. They simply weren't careful, and they decided to take up the habits of those who were around them. And this caused them to actually fall into a certain habit of doing things the way the nations did. And of course, Yahweh's protection is not there. It's what it is. So Yahweh tells us that his arms are not short, his ears deaf, that he can't save us. But our disobedience, the things that we have done to move us off from the course of being led, because Yahweh doesn't force us. Everything is free will. We have to do it freely. All right, okay? Or then he's forcing us. So by our free will, we decide not to do that over and over and over. Now, if you remember when Daniel finally or the children of Israel finally got taken by Babylon, if you remember Daniel, when Daniel was making his supplication to Yahweh, he said this thing right here. He said, we have not listened to your prophets. That is a major thing. We have not listened to your prophets. Now, he's not saying we didn't listen to the law, because it's the law and the prophets. Now, the prophets are testimonies or cases of how the law is carried out. And they came before the people and they spoke on certain levels to get the people to turn back to doing things the way that Yahweh said to do. So now we have gone through some of these things and we've looked at the fact that, okay, Yahweh was, everybody did things according to the energy or the power that was that they were following, which they called their gods. And every nation walked in the name of their gods. And the prophet said, but we're going to walk in the name of Yahweh. Now, Yahshua showed us that he knew of what the prophets had said. And he knew about what his contemporaries said during the time that he was upon this earth 2,000 years ago and change. So in what he was speaking about now, he said to them, he said, my father, he referred to this energy as my father, to Yahweh as my father. Now in the scriptures, the prophets called him Yahweh too. But those who he was around during that time, they didn't want to use the name anymore. And so he went ahead and said in something that he had spoken, and we looked at it last week, he said, who you say is your God. Now, how gods really came up, gods and all these things come by the imagination of man. Now, whenever we had a really great power that is beyond our comprehension, it was known, we call that a god. Okay, so if someone came in here from another planet and they were able to have technology that would razzle and dazzle everyone in this earth, or whoever they visited, they would call that their god. That's who that was. That's what their god. And so this is something that man looked to as something that had much more power than him, that had the ability to direct him, show him truth, whatever the case is, but it was not necessarily of that body or the spirit of that body that was directing humanity or mankind out of the earth, okay, to come to the point that we follow and we're able to see exactly how everything moves. Because this is what it comes down to. We have to follow a particular spirit. If you remember, he said that Yahshua died, leaving us an example for us to follow. Now, something is there for us to follow to come from under the subjection that we have been under spiritually. And as we move, we're going to see that the same spirit directs us to come from under that same subjection in their world. So as we looked at certain things now, last week, we saw that Yahshua made a difference between what they called God and what he says was his father. Okay? So now what we're going to do, we're going to start off, the first scripture is going to go back to John chapter 5. We kind of left off in that area last week. So John chapter 5. Now, Yahshua says, this is who you call my father, God. We saw Peter last week said, those who are, their responsibility is to follow in the footsteps that was left as an example for them to follow. This is what we saw last week in 1 Peter 2:21. And so we know that someone came in here and he was the only one. Yahshua wasn't the only one that came in here and left an example. But we're going to that one because that's the of the Bible. So we're going to John chapter 5, and this is this individual right now speaking. chapter 5 and verse 24. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believing Yahweh who sent me has everlasting life. In other words, you and I are now again awaking, because if you and I don't know that we have an everlasting life, well, we can't exercise it. Well, what happens now when you wake up to who you are and who you are in the body, you already know that you have everlasting life. That's the first part of returning, is to know who you are. So now the one who believes no longer thinks that he doesn't have everlasting life, and whatever is in the earth that he's meeting here in the earth, or she's meeting here in the earth, this is it. You're born, you live your life, you die, that's it. They don't know. But when you do know, you know that the first thing you're going to know that you really are God. The body has to go because it's subject to breakdown. It's physical and it has to go. Okay, but something is in that body that's being animated, animating that body. And it was sent in here to do a job. And when it's ready, when the time is up for it, it's recalled. And the body simply goes down. Now, the body doesn't totally die. We call it death because we leave it. And of course, they call that death at that point. But there are many, many other living organisms in the body besides you and I, living in our vessels. And so when we go, the body can't move because we're the ones who are animating it, okay, with the light that's within us. We have the power to do that, but there are other microorganisms and other little organisms that still lives there. Well, it breaks it down to another form of energy, and it keeps on going. It's just transformation. Well, you also leave this body, and you find yourself in another body. Now they're heavenly bodies and they're earthly bodies, and the heavenly bodies could take on earthly vessels. And this is something that you and I did as heavenly bodies, because if Yahweh is your father, Yahweh is spirit. Okay, he's the father of spirits. He's the father of that which is living, not that which is dying. Okay, so there is no death in it, whether he's going to look at it physically or spiritually. There is no death. You're simply leaving a body. That body can't function the way it used to anymore because you're not there anymore to do what you were doing with it. But there are other organisms in it that's still living and doing their thing and doing whatever they're doing until they take off and turn into something else. And then there are other ones that goes on until that body totally is changed into another form of energy in the earth. So here now we're looking, Yahshua is telling you and I, if we're going to believe in a certain mode of thinking, okay, we're actually awakening to the fact that we have everlasting life. And in that, if we believe Yahweh, then we're going to do what Yahweh says. This is what he left an example in this individual who that spirit came into for us to follow. It says, if we do this now, we will not come under condemnation, but will pass from death. Okay, and there's a spiritual death, which you and I don't know what we hear about. We don't know who we are. We are lacking a great deal of understanding. We don't know how to keep this vessel going. This is death. This is what happened with Adam and Eve. Okay, it says, in the day that you partake of this mode of thinking and life, you're going to die. Well, that is death. Now, when we stop partaking of that mode of thinking, we start to be quickened by a spirit. The spirit that we now are allowing to come in based upon our thought process. Okay, because as we think, and the way we think, we are creating those things that we think about and we are meditating on, And those guys who are running the earth, they know this. That's why they get us to think in a certain mode so we could create their world. And then we become subject to their world because we continue to think on that in that manner. And we think that now we have to go out and make money in order to pay our rent, in order to get a car. This is all part of that society that they are creating. But as we're doing that, we got to keep in mind that we're taking our hands off nature. Okay, so no more are we putting our hands in the earth to cultivate it. No more are we getting our, the power of the Father to give us water, milk, or whatever the case is. We are going to those who have enslaved us just to get what we need to survive. So they are our gods, and they could call themselves gods over us because we depend upon them. So when we come to a certain point now, we are going to move from that which is death. And as you and I wake up, we have to get from under them too. Or we're going to remain under that which brings forth death, that which separates us from our Father. So we have to know who our Father is. We have to know the relationship we have with our Father. And as you start to wake up, we have to proceed with caution in order to know that Yahweh is and who Yahweh is. Now let's go over to 1 Kings. Okay, so 1 Kings, we're at 1 Kings in chapter 22. Okay, and as we're here, we're looking. This is the prophet that is speaking. This is a prophet of Yahweh. So in chapter 22, we look at verse 4. So he presented this question to Jehoshaphat: will you go with me to fight against Ramoth Gilead? Jehoshaphat responded, I am as you are. My people are your people. My horses are your horses. Then Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, but inquire this day for the counsel and advice of Yahweh. Now that, if you look in your scriptures, that says Yahweh. If you look at the, you'll go back to the word that they use for Yahweh here. But if you're in this regular Bible, it's going to say God. Okay? So in verse 6 now, he says, so the king of Israel assembled together the prophets, about 400 men, and asked them, shall I go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? They all answered him, go up. Adonai, this is Lord, will deliver it into the hands of the king. Now he says God there in most of those scriptures also. So we just reading it, we don't know that verse 5 and verse 6 talk about two different spirits. Okay? We don't know it just by reading one of those regular Bibles. Okay? But Jehoshaphat asks, is there no longer a prophet of Yahweh here? Because they walked in the name of Yahweh. They just didn't call upon anything. Because if you call upon something, that's going to come. If I say, somebody come and help me, well, anyone could come and help me. Anyone could come and help me. And where would they take me afterwards? You don't know. So anyway, we have to make sure that we invoke who we want and not just anyone. So we're going a little further here. It says, but Jehoshaphat asks, is there no longer a prophet of Yahweh here? So we may inquire of him. We want the one who is head of the body. So that one could direct us, and we will be in the path, in the green pastures, getting our souls restored as that one directs us. So it says, so the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there remains one man. Do you see what's going on? He's talking to many people of Israel. But they have gone astray. There's one man that's there. And that's usually what takes place. Everybody is doing something else because they're visited by separate spirits. And we get taken off. But there's one man that is there, by whom we may inquire of Yahweh. But I hate him. That's usually what the deal is. They usually don't like that guy. Okay, as Yahshua said, listen, they're going to hate you because they're first hating me. And if they're going to do this to the head of the body, they're going to do it for those who are going to be the other members of the body, who's going to follow that head. Well, they hate this guy. That's usually what happens to you and I when we decide to follow Yahweh, because we find ourselves becoming peculiar in the things that we think about and we want to do. Nobody else wants to do it. And we could be pressured by the peer pressure if we're around people of the world, and we separate ourselves if we're around them and we want to follow them. That's what happens. It's a natural thing. If we want to be around people following different spirits, because, many spirits have gone out, and they're there to tell us and direct us subtly away from what the Father said. Okay? And usually how they come, guys, they come with all this knowledge and all this understanding that's usually channeled. And what you and I have to do, we have to make sure that we look at the word of Yahweh to test that spirit. That's what we have to do. If we don't do that, we fall into the same channel that so many have fallen into before us. And we just become just like that. So here we go now. But I hate him because he never prophesies anything fit about me. I wonder why. Because he's over there calling upon people who have other spirits. Other spirits are directing this individual right now. So when he calls upon the one man who is saying, listen, do what Yahweh says, that one man is saying, put down these false prophets and do what Yahweh says, and he can't stand it. Because Yahweh, sooner or later, Yahweh's hand is going to move, and it's not going to be nice for this man who has been going sideways and not walking the mode of Yahweh. Well, it's no different with any one of us. Okay? The law is already set. We have a certain amount of what you want to call rope, if you will, in order to hang ourselves. But they're set. So if we do something that's against the law, it's going to come to a point that is going to bring balance. Simply, it's going to bring balance, and we're going to be subject to whatever it is that's causing that balance to come. Now, you and I are not victims at that time. No, we are causers. We caused it. A curse causeless cannot come. So we're the ones we're causing it by our own action. But we may call ourselves victims, but there's no victim. No, we have done something that has opened up a channel for something to come within our lives, whether it's in favor of our Father or not. That's our actions. So we go a little further here, okay? Nothing is prophesied that is fit about this individual. Only evil always. Micaiah. So it says, then Jehoshaphat said, the king should not say such things. Now, we're going to go a little further here, and we're going to go to Zechariah. Now, everything is brought down into the earth. When you call upon the name of Yahweh, we actually blaspheme the name of Yahweh when we're using that name and we're doing something that is contrary to that name. Because that name, to do something in that name, you have to do it according to that nature. The nature. You have to do it according to the reputation of that name. That name is coming out of the all. The all is in that name. When you and I do exactly what that name is presenting before us, that name is in us too. And we have the authority of that name. Remember, the priests in Israel when they put the priestly blessings upon the people, remember what they were saying. So my name will be upon them. Now the name is just not Yahweh upon them. The name is the characteristics, the nature, the reputation, everything, the authority of that, what that name carries. So when you invoke that name, there's a belief that we have to have, and there is a nature in which we have to do things. We just can't invoke that name and do things that's contrary to that name, because now that's blaspheming that name. And that's probably why the children of Israel didn't want to call that name, because they weren't living according to that. So they decided to say, okay, let's not use that name because we may potentially bring something hazardous upon ourselves. So we don't really want to use that name. So anyway, what we're going to do now is go to Zechariah 10. So now everything has to be brought into the earth. Remember, Moshe went up to the mountain. Moshe was told, make sure that you make everything according to the pattern that was shown to you. There's a pattern that is shown to Moshe. And so Moshe was making everything according to this pattern that was coming down. And so a name was coming down to the people also. A name. So in Zechariah, this is how the prophets did it. Now we just looked at the other prophet, okay, or this other man that said, isn't there a prophet of Yahweh around? Because he didn't want to call upon something else. He wanted to invoke that which he wanted to direct him. Okay, so in chapter 10 now, in verse 12, it says here, I will strengthen those in Yahweh, and with the name of Yahweh they will walk, says Yahweh. With the name of Yahweh they will walk. Now, this is not just walking because I'm saying Yahweh. Because if I'm saying Yahweh and I don't have the nature, the characteristics that has been laid down, I'm not walking in that name. It's impossible to. That's like saying I am brave, but I'm scared. You can't have both. No one could. So we have to have that nature, and in that nature, we will walk. In that nature. That's how things open up to us in that nature, because that's truly how we spiritually call upon Yahweh. Everyone has to serve Yahweh in spirit and in truth, not in lip service, okay? And if we're calling the name and we're blaspheming the name at the same time, that's only lip service. It doesn't go down to the heart because we have something else in our hearts, in our desires. Now, I'm going to go over to Isaiah. I'm going to read a couple of scriptures real quickly that brings that point together, hopefully. Isaiah 26 and verse 8. 26 and verse 8. It says here, yes, in the way of your judgment, O Yahweh, have we waited for you. Our desire is in your name, and to the remembrance of you, because Yahweh is a remembrance. It's a memorial. The name of Yahweh is a memorial. So when we do all these things that Yahweh is saying to do now, this, just as Yahshua says, when you do certain things, I will send the Comforter. It says the same thing. And it will remind you of all that I've said, because the name caused you and I to remember. So we are causers. We cause things to happen. You have a causal body, okay? And that causal body that you have is a creative body. We create with that body. And if we don't know what's going on with that body, we create for somebody else who use us to cause their world to come into fruition. Once you and I know what's going on, we no longer build their world. And it has to come to an end. And the more people who know about it, this is light that's coming into the world. This is how the condemnation of this whole world comes into play. When light comes into darkness and those actually take on this light, hey, the devil has been put upon notice, because that which is in you now and myself is going to change, because light is shining into our darkness. And that removes it. It condemns that spirit. That spirit has to go. It's the end of it. Now, if you know what's going on, they don't want that to happen, so they lead us and direct us in darkness. And we continue to build their word. And we continue to call upon that which they put in our Bibles to call upon. You call upon Jesus, but they put that name there. They put that name there. We call upon God, same thing. Okay? That's what we do. And everywhere we look, we'll see God, Jesus. Now, it doesn't mean that just because you call upon Jesus, that the Father will not listen to you at all. No, that's not the case. Because our Father showed us that he appeared to our forefathers as God, because that's what they believed. He appeared to them as God to direct them away from their belief system. He appeared to Abraham. Abraham and all those guys were energizing figurines, and these were all energies that were going upon these figurines that would actually help them by these spirits that they put up on there, okay? And they called them household gods. That's what they were. They called them household gods. You could go search it out. Household gods. All these people of ancient times, they wouldn't have a house or a home without having a household god. And they would ask of that God. Now, Yahweh had Abraham move away from all this right here, and he said he will show him something else, and he would have Abraham look to Yahweh, not to the household gods anymore. It would be something totally different. If you remember, I think it was the book of Joshua, I think it is, that Abraham destroyed all his father's household gods. Because he said they can't hear, they can't speak, whatever the case is. He said there's only one true God they put in the book, but it's really not even a God. Okay, so Yahweh directed him away from all that by appearing to him as the one and only true God, and directed him away from that. But he met him where he was. He met him where he was and revealed himself to him as he took him further away from that darkness towards the light. Now in Isaiah chapter, we just got to read Isaiah chapter 24, right? 26. We didn't read it? 26 and verse 8. Okay, we did read that. We did read that. Isaiah 26 and verse 8. Okay, so I'm going to go to 1 John now. 1 John. Now here comes Yahshua's the apostle, one of Yahshua's apostles. Now this is the apostle that they said Yahshua loved. His name was Yochanan. We call him John. And chapter 1, let's look at verse 4. Okay, so in here he says now, he says, beloved, do not believe every spirit. Do not, because there are many spirits out there. But test the spirit so that you may proceed with caution. Or to proceed with caution, test the spirit so you may know Yahweh. Okay? So stay in the nature of what Yahweh is telling you to do. Stay in those characteristics, okay? That reputation, that authority, and test those spirits and make sure that you're walking in what that body, the head of that body, wants us to walk in. Test it. Well, we can't test it unless we're going to follow the laws and the prophets, because those are the two witnesses that brings light. If it's not according to the laws and the prophets, there is no light. Well, light comes into the world, but we don't want the light because we want to serve something that we feel is going to go with how the things we like in the world. So we don't want to be let out. We want the cake, and we want to eat it the way we want to eat it, how we want to eat it, with who we want to eat it with. We don't want to do it the way that which is directing us out is telling us to do it. We don't want that. So it says, do not believe every spirit, but test that spirit to see whether they are of the head of the body that's directing you out. Okay? Because many false prophets have gone out into the world, and the Father did not stop them and is not going to stop them, because that's how he tests those who love him. Because it told you that in your scriptures. He said if someone comes up and they start saying certain things and they start coming to pass, but then they tell you, go off and do something else, this is a prophet. He said, don't listen to that one. Yahweh has come to test you and myself to see if we're going to truly love Yahweh. So the same spirit is coming from the same one who wants you to walk in this mode of the Holy Spirit. It's allowing a test to come before you and I. And in it, we're going to learn, because at some point we may fall off the bandwagon and have to regroup to get back on that path. And so that soul learns. But if we just simply did follow the instructions, we wouldn't be falling. That was the difference between Yahshua and Solomon. Yahshua did what he was told. That's what he told you. He said, I do nothing except what my Father tells me to do. But you go and read the books that Solomon wrote. Solomon told you that he checked out all kind of stuff. He investigated. He was dabbling. He was investigating to see what happened. Well, if I did this today, what's going to happen next year at this time? If I follow it this way, that's what's going to happen next week at this time. He was playing with it, and Yahweh didn't take his Holy Spirit from him, because Yahweh wanted him to testify of just when someone was either moving off course or moving closer, exactly what would happen, and that would be building the body, the spirit body. So Solomon was able to testify that it doesn't really matter what you do. The only thing you need to do in this life is to make sure that you reverence Yahweh. So he came to a conclusion which Yahweh led him to, and he told everyone that the only thing that you have to do in this earth, which is the only duty, is to make sure that you call upon the name of Yahweh, which is live by the nature, live by the characteristics, and you have that authority. Okay, that's what he's saying. So let's go to 2 John now. So we just got to read that many spirits have gone out into the world. Okay. And so we're going to go to 2 John. So many spirits have gone out. Who are we going to trust? Look at verse 5. Chapter 2, 2 John, verse 5. But now I plead with you, lady, though I wrote any new law to you, but that which we had from the beginning, that we love one another. So whatever you had from the beginning was trying to teach you to love in the first place. Not the love that these spirits are telling us to love by, in the feelings and that which is outside of the correction or the direction in which Yahweh has given us. No, go back to the beginning, and you're going to see that even in the 10 Commandments, it was all how you would treat your fellow man and treat and deal with Yahweh. It was all in love. And this is love, that we walk after his laws, or according to his commandments. We live according to those commandments. Those are the laws that as you have heard from the beginning, you should walk in them. Now, what Yahweh does is open the laws to you. And as they open up to you, you start seeing what the pattern is all about, And you actually start to know why Moshe did what he did. Because Moshe had to meet the children of Israel where they were. He couldn't go any further than that. Because he would not have had them. This starts to open up to us. And we start to know what the heavenly law is. And we start to know the physical law that Moshe put or allowed to be put in this earth in a book. We start seeing that, but we know there's a spirit to that law, and that's actually what we have to follow. It starts to open up to us, but it doesn't open up unless we are going to live by that nature and live by the characteristics. If we're going to live by the nature and characteristics of another body, then we're going to get from that spirit what that spirit wants us to do. We have, trust us, we have a lot of spirits that has come into the earth, just as it was back then, being channeled by, these spiritualists that are recognized, greatly recognized in the spirit community or the spiritual community. Blavatsky, that's one of the big names that you have. Casey, these are all channels. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have something that is true, but you still have to test what is given to you against what Yahweh says. It doesn't mean that they're not telling you something that is right. Because Yahweh told you, listen, if someone comes to you and they say all these things that's true, but then they say, go do something other than what I say, hey, I'm putting that before you. You have to look at that. Okay? Steiner, Besant, Ledbetter, all these individuals who could tap into spiritual worlds or spirit worlds and actually investigate it. They wrote books. They tell you and I how to do certain things. But those are spirits that have gone out. You have others, guys. You have others. Okay? Those are some of the ones that I've heard of. So now we look at verse 6 here. Verse 7. It says, for many deceivers have gone out into the world, who do not confess Yahshua, Messiah, as having begun in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an anti-Messiah. In other words, something came into the earth. And somebody in here made themselves ready to take on that spirit. Your Bible told you that that spirit came into a man. And that spirit directed that man. And anyone who is going to tell you that that spirit didn't come in and do all that, and that man was walking that spirit, and it says right there in your scriptures, if you believe that spirit can't come into you and it's only for that individual, then the situation then is we're gonna remain bastards, because we are not believing that the same spirit that quickened that individual has the same power to quicken our mortal bodies. Because we're thinking it could only be done to that guy. That's what we're thinking. So we go a little further now. It says, look out for yourselves that you do not lose those things which we have worked for, but that we may receive a full reward. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Messiah, this only begotten Son, who was in a man, does not have Yahweh. Whoever does abide in what someone in this earth received and died, leaving for us to follow, can't abide in Yahweh, because that spirit was abiding in Yahweh. And if you believe in that spirit, then you're going to abide in Yahweh too. He who abides in the doctrine of the Messiah has both the Father and the Son, because they come and they sup with you, because you have actually come to the point that you are making that sacrifice. So you come to the altar. This is where heaven and earth meet. This is the crossroad. Okay? You come to that point. and you're going to make your sacrifice. And the sacrifice is going to be, you're going to do exactly what your father said. And we're not going to move based upon our ego. So I'm going to do something totally different now. And so I will belong to my father, and I will not belong to myself anymore, because I'm not for me. I'm not for my ego. I am for the one who sent me in here to do a job. So are you. When you and I wake up, that's what we're here for. So the Father and the Son comes and sups in us as we come to the altar and we make our sacrifices. And we have spoken about that at length. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, the teaching, do not accept him into the house of Yahweh, or the body. Do not accept him into the house of Yahweh there, nor welcome him, because this is one of those spirits that's invading. And what you're doing, you're acting like a T cell to tag that individual and identify that individual, okay, just as how it works in your body. As, okay, this guy can't come in, okay, this is the path that he's trying to come in, this pathogen, so we're going to tag him so he can no longer come in that mode. The same thing, as above, so below, and it's also in your body. Okay, so here goes now. For he who welcomes him is our partaker of all that he's going to do in the body. Just as we're going to get shots, and whoever allows that to come in the body, they're going to be a partaker of whatever that mRNA is going to be doing in the body. Take that to the next level. You have a society, you have a kingdom, and someone is coming in and they're saying something that Yahweh told you, this is not so. Well, we allow him to come in anyway. This is like taking the mRNA. Same thing. But there's spirits out there that's going to tell you that you're discriminating. Yes, you are. You are discriminating, because Yahweh gave you the spirit of discernment, which is a spirit of discriminating. Okay, for you and I to discriminate, to know what we should bring in and what we should not. But they made that word a bad word. So if we're not paying close attention, we think, well, you can't discriminate, and they make it their law. That's another reason why we have to come out of their laws, because if we decide to say we're going to do what Yahweh says and discriminate in this manner, they could take us to court in their own system, because there's a law against discerning, which they call discrimination. So if you say, okay, here goes a person who wants to marry a man who wants to marry another man, and I say, no, I'm not going to do that, they say you're discriminating. Well, your father said not to do that. No, but you are a state-sponsored religion, so you got to do what we say. You can't do what Yahweh says here, because you are discriminating and you are going against the state's law. So how do you not do what the state says? You have to come out from under the state. Because if we do something other than what Yahweh says, we're going to receive that plague. That's what Yahweh said. It's not hard to understand. Now, once it's before you, it's not hard to understand. Okay, once we come to some, to seeing it, it's like, oh, okay, I see it now. Now we're going to go to Acts 16, Acts chapter 16, and let's look at verse 16. Now this one is going to show you that there are other spirits out there, and they're not necessarily harmful, but they're not necessarily going to be working for the body. Okay, so here we have in verse 16 now. It says, now as we went to prayer, a certain girl possessed with a spirit of divination met us. Now a spirit of divination is not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily bad. It's a spirit that's going to cause you, if you have it, you have it. It's a power that's attached to you, and it's not necessarily something that is bad, because you could use it for Yahweh. So don't be afraid of the power that you have realized that's within you. Work with it to serve your Father. Use it in the nature of your Father. Use it in the characteristics of your Father. Test that same spirit and direct it to do what the Father says to do, because it's an extension of you. You are the power and you're the creator of all that it's going to do. You have the power over it. You have the power over every spirit that comes around and attaches itself to you, because you and I are the ones who cause it to do that. We're causing it. We are causing it. So here goes now. A certain girl possessed with the spirit of divination, Menace, and she brought her owners much gain by her fortune telling. Well, this is not necessarily a bad spirit. Well, Yahweh could tell the future too. So this is not necessarily something that's bad. And if you have that ability, what makes it bad? If you have it, if you could tell the future because it's just what's there, why would that make you a bad person? So that alone doesn't make you a bad person. So here goes now. She followed Shaul and us and cried out, saying, "These men are the servants of Theo." This is what the Greeks call God, the Most High. They preach the way of salvation to you. Salvation is the redemption. They tell you the way to come out of here. They tell you the way to save yourself from this lower world. They tell everybody, and they shine the light so people can follow the light out. It's what salvation is about. So these men are in here, and that's what they're doing. And this spirit sees that. And it's telling everybody, guys, hey, these men are in here. These are the sons. They're here to get you out. Now, Shaul didn't necessarily have to do this. Probably could have found someplace else to go, but just look at what happens here. Now, she did this for many days. Then Shaul, becoming impatient, that's also not the greatest thing to do, because he could have commanded her to go someplace else. And you know what that spirit had done? It would have went someplace else. Or you could have told that spirit to be quiet when it's around them, and it would have done just that. He had the power. He had the power. Turned and said to the spirit, "In the name of Yahshua Messiah, I command you to come out of her." Well, he could have commanded her, he could have commanded that spirit to do many things. But you saw what happened? He became impatient because she kept following him around and saying all these things. Well, he could have commanded her to be quiet. And you know what would have happened with that spirit? He would have done the same thing that he commanded. And it says here the demon, but it's not necessarily a demon. Okay, or you could say it's a demon, but it's not necessarily bad. Came out the same hour. It's a spirit that's attached to that young lady that she now have received something coming through, and when it comes through her mental processes, she's able to tell somebody what's going to happen. These guys saw that she had this gift probably from a child. She came into the earth probably with it, and they're using her for whatever it is their private gain. But that's not necessarily an evil spirit, because who would cause, if someone is going to be telling the future, where is it coming from? It has to be coming from the same one source who gives understanding, period. That's where it's coming from. Now we got one more. So you got to check, you got to, look at the spirit, and not only check the spirit, but check ourselves. Look at yourself. We have to look at ourselves when we're going to deal with that, because we have to make sure that we're moving in the mode of Yahweh. Just because we're open to what Yahweh is saying doesn't mean we can't strike the rock. We could do that. We could do that too. Okay? We could also strike the rock. Now let's go to 1 Kings chapter 13. 1 Kings chapter 13. Now here, there's some instructions that's given. Chapter 13, and let's look at verse 18. So what we have here is a prophet that was given certain instructions by Yahweh. I'm not going to read the whole thing because we're at the end right now. But you can go back and read it later on. So he was given certain instructions by Yahweh. Hey, I need you to go on this mission. This is what you do. Don't stop and talk to anybody. Don't eat food that anybody is going to give you to on the way. Make sure that you do everything that I say this way. So he takes off and he goes. But somebody else says, guess what, man? I'm dealing with the same spirit that you're dealing with. So when I hear that, now I feel that I could drop the instructions that I was given and jump on what somebody else says. This is how we're let off. Go right back to Adam and Eve. This is the very same thing. We received an instruction and somebody believes, okay, I heard something else. Oh man, well, this is desirable. I can go ahead and do that. We forgot our first love and we keep on doing it. Go to the children of Israel coming through. They did the same thing with their judges. Just look at it all the way. This is how they got sacked by the Assyrians and by the Babylonians. We keep on doing the same thing. This is why David had to fight Goliath. All the times we're doing the same thing, and there's only one result. One result, the same result. Now Yahweh finally brought Solomon in, and Israel was at the pinnacle of its times during that time that Solomon was around. Okay, and he was coming in through David. But during the time of Solomon, all these other nations paid tribute to Solomon. And they had peace all around them. They had peace all around them. Yahweh said he did not take his Holy Spirit from Solomon because he was using Solomon to build the temple, not the physical temple. Yes, he did that too. But by his instructions to you to tell you and I how to be wise, that was building our temple, the spirit temple, which hands cannot build. Okay? So Solomon was telling you the whole thing that you have to do. You ain't got to worry about anything else, man. Just reverence Yahweh. That's your whole duty. Nothing else. If we're subject to these individuals here, we can't serve Yahweh. We can't reverence Yahweh because there's a natural conflict between what we're doing and what they're doing. There has to be a separation. The time is now. In the last days, the kingdom of Yahweh will be established. It will be small as this little mustard seed, but it will grow, and it will not be given over to another. Yahweh has to be in there. And it doesn't mean that you and I could go create a group and call it the kingdom of Yahweh, and that's it, and that's all we got to do. No, that could be part of it, but we would have to call on the name of Yahweh. Call on the nature of Yahweh, the characteristics of Yahweh, which is following those instructions. When we follow those instructions, then it solidifies what we're doing. In Kings, chapter 13 and verse 18 here. So he went about and did all these things now, this guy. But as he's coming back, somebody met him and said, listen here. He said to him, I too am a prophet as you are. And Amalek spoke to me by the word of Yahweh, saying, bring him back with you to your house. Bring him back with you. But that's not what he was told to do. And if I told you to do something and told you not to do certain things, and then you go out following exactly what I said to do or not to do, and someone else comes and said, hey, Mr. Steve said so and so and so. Mr. Lamudja says so and so and so. Well, if I told you to do or not to do, why couldn't I tell you to do or not to do again? That I changed my mind and you should do something different than what I said to do. It's not like I had to send someone to meet you because I came to you in spirit. So if I wanted something different, well, why couldn't I come to you in spirit again? Well, here this individual now was told to bring him back to the house. So he may eat bread and drink water, but notice he didn't tell him the truth. But I should have followed the instructions that I was given. because many spirits are out there. Now, it doesn't mean that this guy was necessarily a bad person that wanted to get the prophet killed. He might have just been so excited that he wanted this man of Yahweh just to come and spend the night in this house, to actually be part of a blessing as far as his mind is concerned. And so maybe a great guilt won't be upon that individual for what happened to this other guy who didn't follow the instructions. And you can read it later on, because he went off course and something happened to him that was very tragic. But the thing is, it comes down to, did we follow the instructions? Did we call on the name of Yahweh, which is the nature, the characteristics, okay? Because this is how the name of Yahweh is put upon us. That's how the face of Yahweh shines upon us. This is how the face of Yahweh, which is light, this is how he shines. This is light shining through into our darkness and removing that. This is how it takes place. When we are able to do what Yahweh has told us to do. And if you don't know if he told you to do it, then he didn't tell you to do it, because if you can't see it and I can't see it, well, don't worry about it. If you don't believe it and someone comes along, as Yahshua did, and shows these individuals during this time that, listen, you got it wrong, because this is it right here, and according to the scriptures, this is what it's saying, and we still want to follow that way, then we have nothing to cover us anymore. Because we were covered by our deception, but now the deception is out there because someone came and showed us that there is more to what we were thinking, and now we have no covering, because our covering was what we believed previously. Now someone came and showed us that what you believed is not really what it's all about. There is more. And so Yahshua told them, listen, okay, I came and told you this stuff right here, so now you have no cloak. They have nothing. Yahweh came and said, okay, make these garments right here so you may have cloak, that you may have covering. That's what the tallit is all about. Okay, it comes down physically, but once you come to spirit, the cloak is actually what Yahshua told you that Yahweh said to do. That's your cloak. So when Yahshua spoke to them, he said, no, you have no cloak, because the tallit wasn't a cloak anyway. It was just following the words that Moshe laid out. But he told him, now you have no tallit, because I have told you this, and it's plain that you can't go that way no more, because I have revealed more than just what Moshe said. And if you believed in what Moshe said, you would have believed me, because he told you to believe in me. That's what he's saying. But we don't want to do that. We want to hold on to what we had. We don't want to go any further. Well, if we could understand it when it's presented, and we don't want to leave what the old stuff that we have, we don't have a cloak. We have no cloak. And the Father could only use us to a certain degree. Beyond that, he can't use us, because we wouldn't come to the fullness of his light. Now, if you want to now, let's go over to Jeremiah 14. This is really the last scripture. Okay, so you saw that guy said something to the prophet, and he actually told him something that was a lie. He lied to him. So we got to proceed with caution here to make sure that we do what we're told to do. Okay, so in Jeremiah 14, let's look at verse 14. It says here, Yahweh will raise up for himself a king over Israel, who will cut off the house of Jeroboam. This is that day, what? Even now. And Yahweh will strike Israel, so it will be like a reed shaken in the water. He will uproot Israel from this rich land he gave to their father, and will disperse them beyond the river Euphrates, because they have made wooden Asherah poles and provoked Yahweh to anger. Now, Remember now, the laws are set. So you don't have somebody up there going, "Ooh, I'm steaming." There's steam coming in his ears. His eyes are turning red. The laws are set. If you and I move in a certain direction, we're causing something. No one has to curse us. The prophet is just telling us what we have caused. That's what he's doing with Israel here. You have caused this. And he will give up Israel because of Jeroboam, which he committed and has caused Israel to commit. This is actually what's happening with us. This is what's happening with us. We are being caused to build our delusion. That's what's happening. Because Yahweh said one thing, those who want us to walk in a different manner, they come and they play with our desires. And when we move in the mode of our desires, okay, there's great strength in that, great power. When you believe and you want something, you and I start to attract that thing. And if they are able to use our desires against us, and we don't want to go in the mode of Yahweh because our desires are being manipulated, guess what? We create for them, and we have moved the umbrella of our Father. Okay, that's all I have to say to you today.